The Feelings Check-In is a podcast for people who love to listen to two women overshare about the challenges of building a business, navigating careers in tech, and trying to have a personal life. I'm Natasha Hoskins.
I'm Dina Burke.
And this is Boys Club.
Wait, is it just Boys Club?
It's just Boys Club.
The Boys Club podcast?
No. Just Boys Club. This is a podcast where Deana and I share about our feelings and bring on people that we respect and know and love to also talk about their feelings. And we have a great episode today with Verité. She's an artist, a musical artist. She's incredibly talented. I listen to her stuff all the time. It's so good. And she was unbelievable at Fest live, just voice of an angel, and also incredibly smart.
Yeah, she's a feeler too. So it's a good match when you get a feeler on the Feelings Check-In because you know they're just willing to spill. Yeah, I think in reflection on the conversation that we had with her, something that is so striking about her and so unique is that she's a really well-rounded person.
Yeah,
like she is this incredible artist, but that doesn't mean not that artists aren't like highly strategic and intelligent people, but like she's an intellectual, but also has this like commercial mind as well. That she's a very talented, wonderful human being, and I really enjoyed the conversation.
I totally agree, and I hope you guys do too.
On today's Feelings Check-In, we have a very special guest. Verité is with us, artist, songwriter, producer, and performer. Her independently released work has garnered over 350 million streams. Just wrapped up a tour for her third album, Love You Forever. I am a big fan, genuinely, so very excited to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been a fan, and you guys have had so many people that I love and admire on your show, so I'm happy to be in the mix.
We're so excited to have you. Okay, so I want to start with, you have been a practicing artist and musician for 12 plus years. You are an experimenter at heart with a lot of this emerging tech, which we love here at Boys Club. You just came off a European tour. You performed at Fest. You've been busy. You've been doing a lot. And I just want to set the stage and just ask, how are you feeling?
I feel good. I feel like it's interesting always an external perspective on what you're doing and how you're doing, because in my head this year I've been on a self-proclaimed sabbatical. I feel like this is the least I've been doing ever in my life and career, and I think it's much needed to like take a step back and learn how to rest and recharge for whatever the next step is. But I'm glad from the external it seems like I'm cooking.
It seems like you're cooking.
Yeah, totally. Oh, you just went on tour. It's such an odd thing to say when you just got off tour.
Well, tour technically ended in like April,
Okay.
March.
Okay.
Right. And it's always so great to be on the road, and you're kind of like putting faces to random internet personas or people that you've met. And especially being in Europe, I was opening for an artist LP, and being exposed to these like massive different audiences, and LP has this massive international audience. And so being in Poland and playing shows or playing arenas in Budapest, and every day is this new novel experience, and so it feels like forever, and then you get back home and you're like, yo, what the fuck am I doing?
Yeah. Fair.
Small World. My husband co-wrote a song with LP, and
Oh, really?
the funny thing about that, to your point, was that stuff started popping off in like Hungary, and it was getting crazy reach.
Yeah, and I think it's also like a perception of what is success, which is something that I spend a lot of time focusing on, you know, for myself, but also kind of planting in the minds of other artists and creators, as like they show up in Mexico and they play 25,000 sold out arenas, and then their US audiences, you know, smaller but still super engaged. And this idea of what success is highly localized sometimes. I think the internet sometimes plays tricks on us and tells us that virality or these different things equate to some semblance of success, and you start to realize that there are way more metrics involved in creating like a holistic career and life as an artist, as a creator, as someone who's running a business, etc.
What do you feel like your relationship is to your fans or your followers or the people who listen to your music?
It's really interesting because in some ways it's changed over time and in some ways it's exactly the same. I view being an artist and making the decision to not only be an artist but try to build a livelihood from my artistry as a service. And I think it recontextualizes a lot of the value exchange that happens between artists and their audiences. And so for me, it really is a service of providing a place for people to go, whether it's physically when I'm on tour, whether it's mentally and sonically when they enter my world and kind of step into the work I create, the albums I create. And then just as like a human in their lives in a non-hierarchical way, when you can do that, sometimes it's impossible and you need to reestablish like you don't know me. But I spend a lot of time just like interfacing with these people and building like a community that I want to be a part of, and that I feel very lucky that people resonate with all of those different elements, and somehow it's equated to this, decade plus long career doing whatever the fuck I want to do, which is ultimately the goal.
Yeah. What I love about what you're saying is something we talk a lot about at Boys Club is like that there are givers and there are takers. And that is not always bad if you're a taker, and it's not always good if you're a giver. But the way that you have just talked about how you make your work is very much as a giver and saying like, I'm in service of my fans and followers and audience. And that relationship is nourishing to you as someone who's giving to these people. And I think that's a really beautiful way to approach a creative practice. And really inspiring to hear how you're thinking about it. Okay, I want to talk about crypto. If we must.
If we must go there, I will bring down the vibe.
Let's bring it all the way down. No, I mean, I really love your approach. I think the way that, at least from an outsider looking in, the way that you've approached a lot of crypto tooling, crypto culture, however you want to look at it and call it, is very much like, let's try stuff and then be really honest about how it works or how it doesn't. And I think that that's incredibly refreshing and also quite rare in an industry where so many people are just like pumping their bags and have an inability to just be like transparent about, okay, these are the things that worked and they didn't. And you recently wrote a thread that I kind of want to just read a little bit of and then just have you go off. So I'm just going to read some of this. You said, okay, but jokes aside, every few months, the same recycled conversation about the failed narrative of music NFTs. It's clickbait. Promises of financial revolution for artists, framing technology as a community that set up unobtainable expectations for an unproven market. Well, the market is proven to not exist outside of a niche circle. Early adopters made a lot of money, me included, in the wave of an explorative hype cycle VC mania. Secondary players entered the game in hopes of capturing the already oversaturated market. Now, a race to zero. So there's more here, and we'll link this thread in the show notes. But would love for you to just talk about, your experience, where you're at now, and it doesn't have to be up only.
Yeah, it's not even that I'm trying to bring down the vibe, but I'm a pragmatist, and I kind of like entered this world in 2021 at a really interesting time before that really public like hype cycle took wind. Mm-hmm. And it was out of a curiosity in an industry that is essentially extremely bad at valuing its greatest asset, the music industry. We've seen a systemic devaluation of music for a lot of factors that are unavoidable. Wholly market oversaturation due to the fact that creating and distributing music is now essentially free. And there was this, at least what lured me in was this curiosity of, can we reinvigorate the value of music through the creation of digital scarcity? Can we play around with the value of music by creating new and novel experiences? And my initial kind of dipping my toe in was to really play in that. And I did really, really well because in a lot of ways I was like first to do a lot of things. And I think that if I were a different person, that doing so well and really capturing a lot of monetary value back when like, you know, $25,000 one-of-ones were the normal, you know, for those glory 4 months. You know, I would be like, wow, Web3 is amazing. Blockchain is amazing. It's doing all these things. But for me, I kind of saw through the veneer and I was just like, oh, I'm never going to be able to translate this to my existing fan base. And I just saw the timer on the thing and how this was only sustainable because there were 20 people participating. And once more people got involved, it would go less, and which kind of pushed me into different types of experiments by fractionalizing ownership and trying to give master royalty points, which I did like in early 2022, where I sold something to a fan at $1 million valuation and he paid, you know, he got 2%. So in a lot of ways, that was a successful experiment, but again, failed to scale out in any meaningful way. And I think as we've watched the race to zero, which I really believe we saw everything from, okay, we're having highly valued one-of-ones down to we're giving away, you know, 100 edition music NFTs to zero. In a lot of ways, I think we're recreating a system, but worse, and have failed to fully distill the actual use cases of blockchain that are unique to blockchain outside of the hope for financialization, the hope to kind of pack your bags. And it's a narrative that I think has been sold to artists that is ultimately hindering them from building holistic careers outside of this ecosystem and feeling dependent on these systems, which is people participating who have a vested interest in the technology's proliferation. So I have a lot of thoughts, but that's a few of them.
I have so many thoughts based on your thoughts. So much comes to mind. But one of the things that has always been really obvious to me about your work is that, first of all, being driven by this curiosity and experimentation, I think is so beautiful in any shape that it takes. And I think that it has manifested itself in this way over the past couple of years for you, but that's a quality that will just continue to bloom for you. And I see in you naturally. And so it's just wonderful to be witness of. One thing that has always been clear is that you, as a creative entrepreneur, have understood that, you know, not to draw lines, but like the Web 2 is where your reach is, and that Web 3, the tools that you are experimenting with are really like the loyalty layer. And so you have like that reach, and then it's like down into the funnel where it's loyalty. And that's how we've looked at it at Boys Club as well. And I think that the one post that you did at one point was about how you had done some surveying of your fans. It was revealed in that survey, in the survey results, that they didn't really care about some of the tooling that you were using really at all. And like that wasn't actually what was driving loyalty for them. And so at that point, it's like when you have this tool set that's meant to do one thing, but when you kind of peek under the hood, it's not really doing the thing that it's meant to do, then it makes a ton of sense to like kind of set it aside and say that was a successful experiment for me, but maybe other artists can't replicate it or whatever it is. So yeah, I guess not really a question, that just sort of an acknowledgement that I thought that was a really smart way to approach it.
I mean, the fan responses were hysterical, and I recommend anyone building anything to go read it. My favorite is like every time you say the word NFT, I want to like fucking gouge my eyes out, you know, or something like that. But the actual reactions were really negative with very few positives. And I think like if we're distilling down what are the actual use cases of blockchain in like a creator sense, a commercial sense, it's really like data, transparent data, and smart contracts, the ability to like immediately execute certain transactions based on, you know, certain conditions. And I think that it's just interesting to watch people who seem afraid, I'm going to make a bold statement, who seem afraid to take their ideas, idealism, and creations out of the ecosystem in which it was incubated and put it into another ecosystem, because in my experience, they fail when planted in new soil, in a different habitat, in a different market, with different consumers. But I think that that pain point is essential to actually building things that have value, that are usable, and have the potential for more mass adoption.
One of the things that I think when I hear you talk about this, and when I look at a specifically musical artist, is that there's this balance that I feel like constantly having to navigate between being a creator, being a world builder, being an artist, with being an entrepreneur, and being someone who has to think about the business of music making, and how that, if you want to have this as the source of your livelihood, which I think most artists do, like, how do you balance those two things? And I think looking at Web 2 scale and Web 3 loyalty and all of these different ways in which those tools have tried to play into that balance. And I'm curious, like, how do you approach that? Like, are you thinking about the art? Because I see you and I'm like, this is someone who's truly an artist, but also you're incredibly like savvy and entrepreneurially minded. And so I'm curious how you approach that. And then when in that sort of matrix of decision making are you thinking about where is there new and novel opportunities that tech and tooling can provide, whether it's blockchain, or I'm curious what you think about AI as well. But yeah, would love to hear you talk a little bit about that.
I mean, from my perspective, I view everything in like a constellation. And I think that as artists, a lot of times we're conditioned to view things in a very like singular stardom trajectory, right? One singular star, one singular goal. And to me, that's like the ultimate luxury of like, that's like winning the lottery of I get to do one thing that is the optimal thing and I am able to sustain off of that. But I think having built an independent project, viewing everything as a constellation of revenue streams, a constellation of creative pursuits that all feed back into the center has been really vital to building something that is like, keeps me creatively fulfilled, intellectually fulfilled, and keeps kind of pushing the boundaries, because what I want to do when I'm 50 is probably different from what I wanted to do when I was 25. And so we want to keep things moving and keep things interesting and dynamic. And I think for me, kind of pushing the boundaries of like experiences and how to present artistry is just interesting to me. And like I've done it from the beginning of my career, back when, you know, no one was embracing streaming, and that's how I started my career, was embracing streaming and like Spotify and getting in with the people at Spotify in like 2014 before anyone thought it would pay anything. And even now, pivoting to like, I've done a lot of work with IYK. I've been working with Chris and Ryan since like 2021.
Love those guys.
Back when, you know, the first disc was an NFC chip laminated on a piece of paper being passed out at my shows, right? And this idea of, can we better understand who's coming to my shows and allow people to leave me a message at my shows, like a comment box, but digitally. And it's like these kind of experiences and experiments, from like, you know, having a crew neck that is access to the next era of Verité, or a tour t-shirt that holds the memories of the tour that you just attended, right? These things are super interesting, and it's almost like flipping the script on everything being hyper digital coming out of the pandemic, being hyper separated, and even AI, everything being hyper artificial. It's like, how can we bring everything back into the relationship between me and the fans, which is ultimately the thing that keeps this wheel turning.
Yeah.
You're talking a lot about the one, if not maybe the only use case for blockchain in the music industry being around the data. Can you say more about that, and like how exactly that manifests or could manifest for an artist?
What we've seen is the centralization of all of these platforms, and there is a middleman. Spotify is a middleman. Ticketmaster and Live Nation are a middleman. Social media is a middleman. Everything is a disruption and a wall and a blockade from you and the people who have even a lot of times opted into seeing your content through algorithmic gating, through holding the data, of who attends your shows, who listens to your music, and then monetizing that data back to you as the person who actually provides value to these platforms. And I think a lot of the quote unquote Web3 initial promise was we were going to demystify that black box of data and actually allow the users of platforms to be the ones who capture the value of those platforms, like the actual like monetary value. And I think that we've seen that initial promise kind of fade into the distance in favor of the traditional structures of how companies are funded, with VC kind of jumping in and getting involved. There's different considerations that practically have to be taken. But a lot of that first experiment of the first iteration of like guest book and the IYK disc was Chris and I walking around the park and me having a tour. And it was right after COVID. And one of the promoters that I had worked with in DC for years went under in COVID. And with that went, you know, the thousands of email addresses and contacts that we have kind of developed over years of, and the data of like who actually attended those shows that the promoters then go back and reach out to those people to retarget. So I was starting from zero in this market, and I like wasn't selling the same amount of tickets I was because we weren't able to reach these people. So that became an experiment in a solution, like a tangible solution to an actual problem of, I don't know who comes to my shows. Is there a way to better incentivize people to identify themselves at shows, to provide that data so that I get it and then I can directly retarget, and then creating a system to understand, well, who came to Chicago and who came to LA, etc. And so a lot of, again, like I think the most impactful experimentation is in trying to solve these individual problems of understanding and having access to the data of who your audience is. And I think, again, it's one of the most useful arguments for why blockchain is necessary, you know, either on the front end or as the guardrails are, you know what I'm trying to say. It's like railway of the internet or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. So where do you think we go from here? Crypto culture is atrocious. And I have seen and heard you say the way to move forward is like Control Alt Delete. Let's try again. Let's reset. And what do you think that looks like in practice, both as someone, as a creative in this industry, but also just as participants in this industry? Like, what does that look like to sort of have a reset on, I think, some of the cultural brainwashing that we all thought was going to happen, and now it's like, okay, that's not what it is, but where can we go from here?
I mean, I really think it needs to be a delete. I mean, we can even set aside the like truly blatant and vocal misogyny and racism, right? That is just like an actual, like embedded in the fiber of the dialogue and rhetoric that you see on social media in affiliation with like crypto Twitter and crypto culture, right? We can have a whole separate conversation about that. When I look at it for artists, I also think that the biggest, man, I don't want to be like the biggest lie. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but the framing of Web3 as a space, as a community, and framing, it was in the thread, framing a technology as a community undermines artist and cultural contributions to technology that it needs to actually survive and thrive and gain new users, because technology needs new users in order to survive. And I think that there isn't that reciprocity. And I think that it's also conditioned artists to be like, well, I deserve this reciprocity because of these initial promises. And it's also not realistic. And so I think that it's placed artists in a position of financial dependency on these promises and hope of this financial revolution that isn't going to come from this. And I think that that conditioning runs deep. And I would love to see a reinvigoration of companies bringing on creatives in an official capacity at early stages to help them grow and build effective product, to actually run effective experiments and, companies that I have worked with in that capacity have real world use cases.
Yeah.
Because they have creatives on the team embedded in the fabric of their teams, and then are able to actually understand who the end consumer is.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, it's like, let's extract the community from the technology. Blockchains do not need artists to make a lot of money. And I think that, I don't know, just taking a step back and again, distilling what is actually useful here and what are realistic expectations of, the structures that have been built here for artists to rely on and to reject.
Wow. That was such a powerful distillation of so many
Totally
disparate feelings that I've been having and not been able to like articulate. And yeah, wow. I can't wait to like listen to that again, because that idea of the technology, and I think Boys Club has been complicit in this, and it's something that like we think a lot about our role in and moving forward, this idea of technology framed as community and how extractive that is for the culture creators who are pouring their like beautiful world building skills into that. And yeah, it just, so much of that resonates. I think that part of why the promise of crypto for artists, and I think musicians in particular, was so seductive was, I think, speaking into this idea of there being so many gatekeepers in an industry that feels like where the value accumulates is disproportionate to where the value is created. And so I think that like when crypto and blockchain came around, and it's like, whoa, maybe this is a solve for something that feels so broken. And I think that for a lot of people, streaming feels really broken. And I know that also the music industry has like made a lot of gains over the past 10 years because of streaming, and that it was really broken and now it's a little bit less broken, that there's at least some money. So I'm just curious, as a futurist type thinker, when you're thinking about the industry that you're working in, like, where does it go from here? And I guess sort of maybe on a smaller scale, like when you're thinking about your own money situation, like where are you making bets?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think looking at the historical context of emerging technology and who benefited and benefits from emerging like distribution platforms, social platforms, etc., it's usually always the first movers who capture the biggest market share, who are able to capture attention that then rolls over as more wide adoption comes in. And so, for instance, it's like I embraced streaming really early, and I was, first on New Music Friday in front of Kendrick Lamar, and I own all my masters. And so I actually captured the value of all of those streams and got to see the real financial impact of what it means to have, hundreds of millions of streams compounding. And then over the life cycle of streaming, what you've seen is the reconsolidation of power, money, and attention, always going back to the top. Major labels bought stakes in major streaming companies and segmented off editorial and algorithmic distribution to those entities. And you see that in social platforms. It's like if you were early on TikTok, you could be Charlie D'Amelio level for like doing silly dances, and now you don't see that like quick meteoric rise of star because it is so oversaturated. And it's like the same thing happened in Web3 and just like lightning speed, because as technology grows and adapts, like the life cycles actually get much shorter. And so as an artist, as somebody who, when I started my career, had a 10-year vision, it's about adapting for what the next 10 years will look like. And I'll go back to like the constellation. It's really just about numbering the 10 things that I want to do, both for like creative fulfillment, but also for, financial gains, right? Mm-hmm. And at any given moment, being able to adapt to what is a hostile and ever-changing marketplace, and having the freedom to adapt and maintaining that freedom, maintaining that independence. And sometimes that means I'm doing numbers 7, 8, 9 on my list of priorities because I'm like, oh, I need revenue. And like, I just need income right now. But for the most part, it's doing 1 through 5. And it's actually doing the things that I love doing. And I'm very lucky that I have a segmented brain that I love creating art and touring and solving creative problems as much as I love strategically solving, I don't know, valuation problems for how we can create new and novel experiences to better collect data and understand our audiences and reward them, which opens up a whole separate world of consulting and strategy and helping to bring these experiences to life. And so I think becoming as well-rounded as you can as like a creator and a thinker and a human, and remaining agile and adaptable to every industry and every circumstance as it shifts, it just allows for way more longevity.
Yeah, I really love that way of thinking about having a set of priorities around your career and life and scaling them up based on what you need or what is required, or whether that need is a monetary need or a creative need or a creative fulfillment. I think that's a really powerful way to think about our lives across the board, like whether you're an artist or just a human being working it all out. I think that's a really powerful way to think about your time and attention and energy and what you pour yourself into. And Verité, this has been so lovely, and like just I really, really respect the way that you think about your career and your life, and I think it's really refreshing to hear somebody so smart think so critically about the things that I care about and the things that I'm thinking about. So thank you so much for being here. I just want to close with what are you cooking? What's next? What are you up to?
I've been cooking, I mean, literally the same meal every day. So like if we're talking in a literal sense, I've been making adult chicken nuggets every day.
Nice. Hyperfixation on adult chicken nuggets.
Hyperfixation, the healthy kind. And
Nice.
so that's the literal. But I think that having taken these last few months to kind of take a step away and reevaluate, like, what am I doing? Why am I doing what I'm doing? And like, what do I value? And what do I want my life to look like? I was kind of like willing to give up everything. I was like, maybe I'm going to take a full step away from reality and like go live in a cabin in the middle of a field somewhere. But I'm not. I think that it's actually really motivated me. Like I'm starting to like write and create music again with like a new perspective. I'm working on some interesting projects around an anniversary of the project that's coming up, and how do I value all of my past work, and how do I share all of the pieces of that with the world as we kind of look at music as being more free and interoperable and collaborative. So I'm thinking about a lot of those things for a project. And inevitably, like, I'm making another album. I will go on more tours. I'm not dead yet, so...
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.